Okay, so I already said earlier that characters' actions show their personalities. So let's see other things that should be considered when creating characters, or actually these are just tips for creating your story characters. Okay, I'll share my screen here. And there we have it. Things to consider when creating story characters. There we go. And this should be linked already into the Moodle, these slides. Okay, first of all, we have the want and need of a character, so of a person in general. Like, it's about what drives a person to do things. What are their goals? So sometimes what a character wants is not the same as what they really need. They might want, let's say, a new car or a new moped maybe, but what they really need is friends or security or something deeper. For instance, in the Pixar summer movie, Luca, there was a nice want and need like the two main characters, the two friends, or the protagonist and his best friend, they thought what they wanted was a Vespa, a kind of moped, but what they really both needed was something else. So if you have Disney Plus, go and see Luca and see what their wants and needs are with these characters. Also, it's a nice film. Okay, often a character might have even an obsession about some specific thing that they want, but it's not what they really need. Or they could have a phobia. And that could be a story element. They could, for instance, fear all kinds of fire and flames. And what they really need is to get rid of that fear. Then this is something I already said, that personality shows in action, like in the way they do things. Like a character could be saying one thing, they could be saying that they are brave, but in reality they are nothing but brave. Or they might be saying that, oh, I'm always so honest, and but then your audience or reader will see from their actions that they are not honest at all, that they are lying. So you can have your characters lie. Also, you can have them lie to themselves. They might actually think they are brave, although they are cowards. So here's something that I do quite often, that I use real people as the basis of a character, or pretty often I combine several people, that I take, for instance, the looks from one person and the personality from another. And often it's also very hard usually not to have like one drop of your own blood in your, or a little bit of your own personality in that character. Or all of the characters that you create are in some sense reflections of yourself, and of course reflections of the people you have known. And think about the whys. Like, why is this person that you know, or why is this annoying politician acting the way he or she acts? You don't have to know the real reason. You just like do some thinking and try to understand their point of view. Because in order to write like a really good antagonist, you have to understand them. Because even if the character looks evil to the audience's eyes, then in their own story, in their own mind, they are the hero of the story. So everybody inside themselves is the hero of their own story, just trying to get on, trying to do what they can in the world and to live as well as they can. So they might have really different values than you, but then try to get behind those values and understand them. Like, where have they come from? Do they come from insecurity, for instance, or distrust, or fear? Okay, then the level of the development. Like, everybody knows that 3-year-olds act differently than 70-year-olds, although looking at some recent presidents in international news, I don't always see the difference there. It seems to be that for some people who have a lot there in the social media and everywhere else, that it gives them more visibility if they act like 3-year-olds or 5-year-olds. So that might be not their true persona. Persona, by the way, means originally mask in ancient Greece, a mask that the actor is using, because all the actors used masks. So when you put on a different mask, then you wear a different persona. And that's what people can do also in real life. We have different personas in different situations. So we don't act, we are not islands. We act differently in different places with different people. But again, the level of development, if I go back to that, then let's say, well, I'm thinking of a story right now where my main character is like 36, 37 years old, and I'm thinking of making her maybe a little bit older, even 38 or 39. So I'm thinking, okay, what does a 38-year-old usually have in their lives? What kind of things? They have their careers going on. They might be frustrated with their career, or they might be happy with it, and they might have anyway some career goals. That's quite usual in that age. Also, that character might have a family. It's a very usual age also to have a divorce. So maybe to make that character of mine have more problems in their lives, maybe I'll have her just fresh out of divorce, and not to make her life too easy. She might have a 10-year-old child or maybe an 8-year-old child. That's also pretty logical in that phase of life, on to have some sort of children, or maybe if she doesn't have children, then she might have animals. And if she was like 10 years younger, then she might be more interested in different kinds of relationships and trying to find the right sort of relationship for herself, and so on. Or if she was like 22, then she might be in the middle of her studies. So I should think about what she is studying. Is she working also at the same time? Like, what is her situation at that age in general, and what does she want? Does she want an adventure? Maybe if she has been in a boring relationship where she has divorced, let's say she's again 38, then she might want some adventure, but there's a child. So can she have adventures with a child? Yes, why not, depending on the adventures. So
I have a question.
Yeah.
In like a short movie, like a very short movie, how possible is it to have a character, like is it okay to have a character that is not a main character, or in the main characters in general, that shows up at some point, but their relationship to the main character is unidentified, but you can just see, for example, that the main character is comfortable around them, but you don't really know who they are exactly in relationship to the character, like whether they're sibling, partner, friend, you know.
I think your question is a little bit too, at the same time, too specific and too general for me to answer.
Okay.
Because I'm not quite sure what you are like following. It might be something that is connected to your main task idea. So maybe it's better that you send the question to me as an email with a little bit more detail.
Okay.
Okay, but let's move on from here. I think you got the point. So then there are these functions that different characters take in a story. We've already talked about the protagonists and the antagonists. That the antagonist is the main force to oppose the protagonist, or also it could be he or she could be the one who has the same goal, who competes with the protagonist. Then a protagonist might have allies. Also, the antagonist might have allies and helpers. Then there are gatekeepers and mentors, which are characters from or functions from the hero's journey. And I've linked several hero's journey resources into the Moodle. By the way, you might want to look at those. Then often the ally or helper could be also the best friend. There could be a mentor or a love interest. And some friends can be false friends. So relationships can change and should change during the story. So relationships are dynamic. Then there is this kind of character who's the mirror or shadow to the protagonist, and we'll talk more about the shadow when we get to the Jungian archetypes. backstory is also nice to have for the character. I already talked a little bit about it, I think, but it should be relevant to the story in general, and it should not be explained at any point, so that because that's always boring when your characters start like reciting their backstory or saying that, oh, this is my sister who was lost for 20 years and now she's back again, and my after our parents divorced and my mother moved to the Antarctic with her, and now you are here. Oh, that's so great. So that sounds really
Sounds Japanese.
Okay, so clarify the character's wants and needs and obsessions, ambitions with this backstory, everything that drives them in the present. So these are things that you should know, but they should come up only when needed and during the action. Okay, and we'll get to archetypes soon enough. But my take to archetypes is that family and family members are something that we all share through all cultures and all ages, and those make up of many of the archetypes, like the king or the queen or a princess or a prince. But when you read these old myths, I mean, they are great material for inspiration to read myths and fairy tales, but then especially in the like mythology, in the epics, the characters that are supposed to be heroes, they act in really repulsive ways to modern viewers or readers. So starting from the Bible or the epic of Ramayana or Gilgamesh, sorry, Rama. Don't take this personally. Then there's the change of the character. I already said that there should be changes in the relationships, but if you have a longer story, especially, then the character, at least the main character, changes in some way. So that's called a character arc. There's also story arcs, but this can be used to deepen your characters. However, if you have a certain sort of comedy, like a sitcom, these character arcs might be really slow, and sometimes sometimes the characters might not learn anything at all or change in any way, but the situation goes back to zero after the story is done. But if you have any sort of deeper story, then consider how your characters will change. And even your heroes should be flawed, because that's how the world is. Nobody is perfect, like it said in a famous movie. So what is the main imperfection of your character? I already talked about some, that it might be a phobia, that's easy to do, or it might be something deeper, like maybe a fear of commitment, or fear of not being socially accepted, something like that, or something quite specific, like fear of ants. So usually the people don't see their own imperfections, and that can be also reflected in stories that we tell, that your character thinks that he or she is like very calm in all situations and very rational, but everybody else sees that they are not calm at all. So a good example is Donald Duck in the Disney cartoons from the 1940s and 50s, where there's even the opening song of Donald Duck, like, who's got the sweetest disposition? One guess who never ever starts an argument, who never shows a bad temperament, who's never wrong but always right, who never dreams of starting a fight? No one but Donald Duck. Who gets stuck with all the bad luck? No one but Donald Duck. So it's an ironic song because we know that Donald Duck is nothing like that. Like, he doesn't have a sweet disposition, and he does start a fight quite easily. But that's how he sees himself. That he's the calmest person in the Disney universe. And that makes it funny, of course. Okay, character webs. So I already mentioned that characters are not islands. People are not islands. There's even a quite famous book called No Man is an Island. But no woman as well. Yeah, how are the characters of your story connected to each other, and how do these connections change? So who becomes, how do lovers become enemies to each other, or how do strangers become lovers, and so on. So usually if you draw a web of all the characters and the connections and the changes, then that's helpful. Especially if you have a story with lots and lots of sub-stories, like a series that goes on and on for many seasons, then or a novel that has many characters. So web might be helpful in there. And yes, usually when you take courses on creating characters, then the teachers there might say that, okay, you should make a list of the physical of how your character looks like physically, what their social background is, how they have been educated, how they are living. But it's all connected to how the character connects to the world and how they have connected in their childhood. All of these things, like the culture and family and society, they shape us. Quite simply, if we get bad food or very little food to eat when we are children, we don't grow as tall as those who have more to eat or better kind of food. So, and in the 1800s, it used to be a big problem that poor people were living in smoky rooms or in cities with very bad air, so that made their lungs weaker and they got ill, and that also made them physically smaller and weaker looking. And the rich people. They were living in the countryside. They had or in better air suburbs in general. So they looked healthier and were taller. And that's why in the early 20th century, rich people who also had university education, they thought that poor people were naturally small and sickly and not very intelligent. And they made up these theories that a certain class of people are naturally better than other classes of people. And they didn't see that it was all about the circumstances, how people grew up. But even if you have good physical circumstances when growing up, if you have an emotionally harsh environment, then that might shape your personality in many ways. So you might be living in a palace, but if both your parents are heavy drinkers and they have emotional and mental problems, then you won't have that happy childhood after all. So rather than making this kind of long list about what a person's traits are physically and psychologically, think about how they affect the behavior of the character and their actions in the now of the story, in the present. So again, the whys and hows. Okay, then attitude. Sometimes I'm thinking that attitude could be described as part of the personality, or it could be actually called personality. Like, what is your attitude towards the world or towards other people? If you are, well, there are these traits of openness and the traits of being less open, which you have probably heard about, which are very much talked about, also about introverts and extroverts. I'm not quite sure how these boundaries are, if they are so rigid or not, as people like to think. But that's probably because of my own personality, because I can be an extrovert or an introvert as I please. I can change my attitude towards the world with a little bit of willpower, but that's not the case for everybody. That's, I understand. By the way, I didn't make a slide about sexuality. Maybe I should, because again, here the attitude towards one's own sexuality is more important than what the sexuality is factually. Like, if you are not happy with your sexuality, or if you are lying to yourself about it, then that's part of your attitude towards yourself, and that affects your actions. So let's say that you think that you are heterosexual. I'm saying these old words because I'm of that generation. Let's say you think that you're heterosexual, but you really are not. But then that will give you some problems in life. That's clear. Or also the other way around. So rather than thinking what the sexuality is. The more important question is what the character's attitude is toward their own sexuality and how it affects their actions. Okay, and the attitudes that are different between people, they are often like a source of unresolved tension, or which is also called the story motor, if you are thinking about creating a series, for instance. And then this is the last slide here. So remember contrast between the different characters. So because contrast leads to conflict, and that's something that needs to be there to have stories. If you don't have conflict, then it's really hard to make an interesting story out of it. All right, questions at this point. There's a lot of stuff going on in the chat that, again, I haven't seen any of it because I've been concentrating on talking.
Well, I don't basically have a question, but I'm just like, I just want to say that this has been like so inspiring and interesting, and my hand hurts so much from making all of these notes. And I just want to thank you that this has been really interesting to like have a full like lecture about characters, and that really inspires me.
Wow, thank you. Okay, I'll stop sharing now and stop the recording. I'll have to have a small break for drinking water, and then we could go on to the archetypes.
Carita,
yes?
Like it's 11. Do we already take the lunch break, or did you plan it